You may believe that what happens to you is determined by circumstances, by other people, or by forces beyond your control, but this is the great illusion that keeps you bound. The truth is far more subtle, far more powerful, and it begins within you. Your inner state, what you feel yourself to be, what you accept as true about your life, is the silent author of every experience you encounter. It is not what you occasionally think that shapes your world, but what you consistently are within yourself. Every moment you are occupying a state. Whether you are aware of it or not, you are always feeling something about yourself, secure or insecure, confident or doubtful, fulfilled or lacking. These are not just passing emotions, they are creative positions. They are the very foundation upon which your reality is built. The world you see is simply a reflection of the state you are dwelling in. It mirrors you with perfect obedience, never questioning, never resisting. If you find yourself facing obstacles, delays, or disappointments, do not look first to the outer world for answers. Instead, turn inward and ask, what is the state I have been living in? For the outer world is only echoing what has already been accepted within. It cannot do otherwise. It has no power of its own to originate anything. It only expresses what you have impressed upon it through your inner being. This is why effort alone often fails. You may try to act differently, to force results, to struggle your way into a better life, yet nothing truly changes. Why? Because the state has not changed. You cannot outwork or outrun your inner condition. As long as you remain the same within, the same patterns will continue to appear without. The unseen energy does not respond to your actions nearly as much as it responds to your identity. So the question is not what must I do, but rather who must I become? What is the state of the person who already lives the life you desire? How do they feel about themselves? What do they assume to be normal? When you begin to occupy that state, not occasionally, but consistently, you set into motion a quiet transformation. Without force, without struggle, the world begins to shift. At first, this may seem intangible, almost too simple to be real. But consider this, every reaction you have to life comes from your state. Two people can face the same situation and experience entirely different realities simply because they are rooted in different inner conditions. One sees opportunity, the other sees limitation. One feels worthy, the other feels undeserving, and life faithfully reflects both. You are not here to fight the outer world, you are here to master the inner one. When you take responsibility for your state, you reclaim your creative power. You no longer wait for circumstances to change before you feel better, you change your state and circumstances follow. So begin now. Become aware of what you are being within yourself. Not what you say you want, but what you quietly accept as true. For that is the unseen energy at work, shaping your days, your experiences, and your destiny in ways you may not yet fully see, but will soon come to recognize. Change your state, and you change your world. You may have been told that your thoughts create your reality, and there is truth in that, but it is only part of the truth. Thoughts by themselves are fleeting and often powerless unless they are given life through feeling. It is feeling that breathes reality into thought. It is feeling that impresses the unseen and calls it into form. The unseen energy you are seeking to understand does not respond to empty words or surface-level ideas. It responds to what you feel to be true. You can repeat a thought 1,000 times, but if it carries no emotional conviction, it will remain just that, a thought drifting through the mind. But the moment a thought is felt deeply, when it becomes something you experience within, it begins to take root. It moves beyond imagination as fantasy and becomes imagination as creation. Feeling is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the inner and the outer, the idea and the experience. Consider how naturally this works in your daily life. When you feel worried, your entire world begins to reflect that worry. You interpret neutral events as negative. You anticipate problems, and often those very problems appear. Not because the world is against you, but because you have entered a state of feeling that is aligned with those outcomes. In the same way, when you feel confident, certain, or fulfilled, life begins to mirror that back to you in ways that feel almost effortless. This is not coincidence, it is law. The unseen energy within you is always responding, always organizing, always shaping your reality according to the feeling you sustain. It does not judge whether the feeling is good or bad, helpful or harmful. It simply accepts it as truth and expresses it. So if you wish to change your life, You must go beyond trying to think differently. You must learn to feel differently. Ask yourself, what would it feel like if your desire were already fulfilled? Not in some distant future, but now. What would be the natural feeling of that reality? Would it be relief, confidence, gratitude, peace? That feeling is not something to wait for. It is something to assume. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even unnatural. That is only because you have practiced other states for so long that they have become comfortable. But just as any habit is formed through repetition, so too is a new state established through persistence in feeling. You return to it again and again until it begins to feel like your new normal. Do not concern yourself with how it will happen. The moment you begin to occupy the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the unseen energy begins its work. Circumstances start to rearrange in ways you cannot predict. Opportunities appear, ideas come to you, people respond differently, not by chance, but because they are reflecting the change that has already occurred within you. You are not forcing reality to change. You are allowing it to reflect what you have accepted as true in feeling. This is a far more effortless way of living, yet it requires discipline of a different kind, the discipline of awareness, to notice when you have fallen into unwanted feelings and gently return to the one you have chosen. For in the end, it is not what you say or even what you think that shapes your world, but what you feel so deeply that it becomes your truth. And when that feeling is aligned with your desire, reality has no choice but to follow. Feel it real, and it will become real. There is something quietly shaping your life at every moment, something so familiar that you rarely question it, and that is your assumptions. Not the ones you speak aloud, not the ones you occasionally think about, but the ones you have accepted so deeply that they feel like unquestionable facts. These hidden assumptions form the structure of your reality, and over time they solidify into the experiences you call life. You do not move through a neutral world. You move through a world that is filtered by what you already believe to be true. If you assume that opportunities are scarce, you will notice limitations everywhere. If you assume that people cannot be trusted, you will encounter behavior that confirms it. And if you assume that success is difficult or reserved for others, life will faithfully present you with evidence to support that belief. This is not because the world is fixed in this way, but because your assumptions are directing your perception and your experience. An assumption, when persisted in, becomes more than an idea, it becomes a lens. And once you see the world through that lens long enough, it begins to feel like reality itself. You forget that it was ever an assumption to begin with. You begin to say, this is just how life is, not realizing that life is simply reflecting back what you have accepted within. This is why many people feel stuck. They attempt to change their results without ever questioning the assumptions that created them. They try new actions, new strategies, new efforts, but underneath it all, the same quiet beliefs remain. And so the results remain the same, reshaped perhaps in form, but identical in essence. But the moment you become aware of this, everything begins to shift. Because if your assumptions have the power to shape your reality unconsciously, imagine what happens when you begin to choose them consciously. Imagine deciding deliberately what you will accept as true about yourself, about others, and about your life. You do not need to wait for proof before you assume something new. In fact, waiting for proof keeps you trapped in the old pattern. The power lies in assuming first and allowing reality to catch up. This is where trust is required, not in the outer world, but in the unseen energy within you that responds to your inner acceptance. You may ask, how do I change an assumption that feels so real? The answer is not through force, but through persistence. You gently begin to introduce a new idea, a new way of seeing yourself, and you return to it repeatedly. Even when the outer world appears unchanged, you remain faithful to the new assumption. You think from it, you feel from it, you begin to live inwardly as though it were already true. At first, there may be a tension between what you see and what you assume, but if you persist, something remarkable happens. The new assumption begins to feel natural. It no longer feels like effort, it feels like identity. And once it becomes your identity, the outer world must reflect it. This is the law at work. Assumptions, when sustained, harden into facts. Not because you force them into existence, but because you align yourself so completely with them that reality has no choice but to mirror your inner conviction. So become aware of what you have been accepting without question. For those quiet, repeated assumptions are not harmless thoughts, they are the blueprint of your life. And the moment you choose a new blueprint and remain loyal to it, you set in motion a transformation that no external force can stop. Assume it, persist in it, and it will become your reality. There is a faculty within you that you may have been taught to dismiss, to treat as idle daydreaming or mere fantasy, yet it is the very gateway to your creative power. That faculty is your imagination. It is not given to you as an escape from reality, but as the means by which reality is formed. What you consistently imagine, especially when it is accepted with feeling, becomes the unseen pattern that your world follows. Most people use their imagination unconsciously. They replay past failures, anticipate future problems, and construct scenes of doubt and limitation without even realizing it. And then they wonder why life continues to present them with the same experiences. But imagination does not distinguish between what you want and what you fear. It simply accepts what you dwell upon and begins to give it form. When you understand this, imagination becomes something entirely different. It becomes deliberate. It becomes purposeful. Instead of allowing it to be driven by habit or circumstance, you begin to direct it toward the life you choose to experience. You begin to see inwardly what you wish to see outwardly, not as a distant possibility, but as something real and present within you. The key is not to imagine vaguely, but to imagine with clarity and acceptance. To enter a scene in your mind that implies your desire has already been fulfilled. Not watching it as an observer, but experiencing it as though you are there, feeling the reality of it, the naturalness of it, the simplicity of it being done. This is where imagination shifts from fantasy into creation. At first, the outer world may seem to contradict what you are imagining. You may open your eyes and see no immediate change, but that is only because the outer world is reflecting previous states. It takes time for the unseen to become seen, and during this time your role is not to force the world to change, but to remain faithful to the inner vision. Think of imagination as the blueprint of your reality. Just as a building is first constructed in the mind before it appears in physical form, so too is every experience in your life first formed within. The unseen energy you are working with responds to these inner images, organizing circumstances in ways that bring them into expression. You do not need to concern yourself with the details of how it will happen. In fact, trying to control the how often pulls you out of the state of fulfillment and back into doubt. Your task is simply to imagine and accept, to return to that inner scene until it feels natural, until it feels like a memory rather than a possibility. And as you do this, something begins to shift within you. Your reactions change, your expectations change, your sense of self begins to align with what you have imagined. Without effort, you start to think and feel from a different place, and from that new place, life begins to respond differently. Imagination is not separate from reality, it is the beginning of it. It is the invisible cause behind every visible effect. When you take control of your imagination, you take control of the direction in which your life unfolds. So do not underestimate this quiet power within you. Use it wisely, use it deliberately, and above all, use it consistently. For what you accept in imagination today becomes the experience you live tomorrow. Imagine it as real, and reality will follow. You may have spent much of your life reacting to the world as though it were the cause of your experiences, as though what happens outside of you determines how you feel, what you believe, and what is possible for you. But this is the great misunderstanding. The world is not the cause, it is the mirror. It does not initiate, it reflects. It shows you with remarkable precision the state you are occupying within yourself. Every person you meet, every situation you encounter, every pattern that repeats itself is not happening independently of you. It is responding to you, not to your surface actions alone, but to your inner state, your assumptions, your feelings, your deeply held beliefs. The unseen energy within you is constantly being projected outward, and the world simply echoes it back in visible form. This is why two people can walk through the same environment and live entirely different realities. One sees kindness, opportunity, and support, while another sees rejection, struggle, and resistance. It is not the world that is different, it is the state from which each person is perceiving and projecting. The mirror can only reflect what stands before it. When you begin to understand this, something shifts in the way you approach life. You no longer feel the need to control every external condition or manipulate outcomes. Instead, you turn your attention inward, knowing that the outer world must conform to the inner arrangement. You realize that changing the reflection without changing the source is an endless and exhausting effort. If you do not like what is being reflected, do not fight the mirror. Do not argue with appearances or try to force them into submission. Instead, change what is being projected. Change the state within you, and the reflection will change naturally, without strain. This is not denial of reality, it is understanding its true nature. You may wonder why the world sometimes seems slow to respond, why the reflection does not change instantly the moment you shift within. This is only because the current reflection is the result of past states that have already been impressed. Just as a mirror may continue to show an image for a moment after you have moved, so too does reality carry forward previous impressions. But if you remain consistent in your new state, the reflection must eventually adjust. The key is not to be discouraged by what you see, but to remain loyal to what you know within. When circumstances appear unchanged, it is an invitation to go deeper into your inner state, to strengthen your conviction, to refine your awareness. The outer world is not resisting you, it is revealing you. And as you persist, you will begin to notice subtle shifts. People may respond differently, opportunities may arise in unexpected ways, situations that once seemed fixed begin to loosen and transform. These changes are not random, they are the mirror catching up to your new state. You are not separate from the world you experience. You are intimately connected to it, influencing it in ways that go far beyond what is visible. The unseen energy within you is always at work, always expressing, always reflecting itself outward. So take responsibility not for the reflection but for the source. For when you master the inner cause, you no longer need to chase or struggle with the outer effect. It will follow as it must, faithfully and inevitably. Change within, and the world will reflect your transformation. There comes a moment on this path where you must move beyond inspiration and into something far more powerful, persistence. It is easy to feel aligned for a moment, to touch the state of your wish fulfilled briefly, and then return to old patterns the moment the outer world appears unchanged. But the unseen energy that shapes your reality does not respond to fleeting impressions. It responds to what is sustained, to what is consistently accepted as true. What you hold within yourself, not for a moment but over time, is what begins to take root and express itself. This is why persistence is not effort in the traditional sense, it is loyalty. Loyalty to the state you have chosen, loyalty to the feeling you have accepted, loyalty to the unseen reality that has not yet fully appeared but is already set in motion. The outer world will often test this loyalty. It will present you with evidence of your old state, inviting you to react as you always have. It may show you delays, contradictions, or even moments that seem to deny what you are assuming, but these are not signs that your inner work is failing. They are simply echoes of what has been previously impressed. They are the past playing itself out. If you allow these appearances to pull you back into doubt, you return to the old state, and the cycle continues. But if you remain steady, if you continue to feel and assume the reality you have chosen, regardless of what is seen, you begin to break that cycle. You stop feeding the old pattern and start nourishing the new one. This is where true discipline is required. Not discipline in action, but discipline in awareness. To notice when you have slipped into an old way of thinking or feeling, and gently return to the state you have decided upon. Again and again, without frustration, without force, simply returning, as one would return to a familiar home. Over time, something remarkable happens. The state that once felt foreign begins to feel natural. The feeling you once had to consciously assume becomes your default way of being. You no longer need to remind yourself or convince yourself, it simply is who you are. And at that point, the outer world has no choice but to reflect this new identity. Persistence is what allows the unseen to become seen. It is the bridge between the inner assumption and the outer fact. Without it, even the most powerful realization remains incomplete. With it, even the most improbable desire becomes inevitable. Do not measure your progress by what you see around you. Measure it by how consistently you remain in your chosen state. For the unseen energy is always responding, always organizing, always moving things into place in ways you may not yet perceive. Trust in this process, not blindly but through understanding. You are not waiting for something to happen. You are allowing something to unfold that has already been set in motion by your inner conviction. So remain faithful to your vision. Remain anchored in the feeling of it being done. Let the world take its time if it must, but do not waver in who you are within yourself. Persist in the unseen, and the seen will have no choice but to appear.